the Fantasy Six-Pack Hour. With your hosts, Joe Bond and AJ Applegarth.
Touchdown!
All right, welcome to the Fantasy Six-Pack Hour. My name is Joe Bond, founder of FantasySixPack.net. With me, as usual, Mr. AJ Applegarth. Of course,
what's up?
Messing with something, not ready. Who knows?
I'm ready.
What's going on, man?
I'm not ready.
Of course not. So it's normal. Okay.
Of course.
All right. So tonight we're going to be jumping into the NFC North, those Detroit Lions, Minnesota Vikings, Green Bay Packers, and your Chicago Bears. But before we get into that, hit that subscribe button, that like button, leave those comments, leave those 5-star reviews wherever you listen. And of course, jump over to FantasySixPack.net. Become an all-access member. You get access to our award-winning rankings, our draft cheat sheet, our preseason projections, in-season DFS projections, betting stuff, Discord, where you get to ask all your custom league advice. And we're little preview, little early snippet here. We're bringing in some more betting content for the upcoming football season. Just talked with some guys this morning to bring them on. So in the next couple of weeks, we'll have that start rolling out. So I'm super excited about that as well. And they do college football, which, by the way, AJ and Dylan, our guests here, our league starts tomorrow over there on Fantrax, which is where you got to go play, of course. Fantrax is where it's at for college football and honestly fantasy football as well. I love playing over there. But yeah, our league starts tomorrow, so I'm super excited. If you guys want to jump in and start your league, fantrax.com/fantasy six-pack, and Mike's going to jump in because, of course, I forgot to mention he plays in that league too. So sorry, man. I saw you on mute.
It's okay. I'm the forgotten man behind camera.
I'm just mad that you keep asking me for the code, but just punishing you. No. All right. Well, let's bring in our guests here. So, of course, we're bringing on Mr. Jim Coventry, friend of the show here. How's it going on? How's it going tonight, man?
It's always a great day to talk football, and thanks for having me on.
Yeah, absolutely. And over here, Dylan Clemens, Fantasy Six-Pack. What's going on, man?
Not much, man. Excited to be here. It's been a while since I've been back on the show, so I appreciate you guys having me back.
Yeah, talking. This is your division, man. So
yes,
hopefully you don't get too much bias.
Try not to.
I mean, I didn't have any when we talked Eagles, so
absolutely not.
Absolutely.
You do it when we don't even talk Eagles.
I was gonna say, no chance there was no bias from you. That's nonsense. But all right, let's jump into things here with our NFC North draft guide, and we're gonna start with those Detroit Lions. There we go, Mike. And we're going to start with, and of course I didn't switch the slides around, so we're going to have to do this. This is going to be interesting. So Amon-Ra St. Brown here. So he's been, he's been fantastic. A big target hog in that offense the last couple of years. Jim, is this the year that Amon-Ra can jump in and be the wide receiver one?
I don't think that's in the range of outcomes. I honestly didn't think 1,500 yards in his range of outcomes. He's a slot receiver. He's a great slot receiver. It's in a perfect offense for him. Ben Johnson crafts the middle of the field like nobody else. Jared Goff is at his best in the middle of the field because he really can't live on the outsides. It couldn't be a more perfect marriage. But Amon-Ra St. Brown is in a league where the defenses play zone 73% of the time. And so being a slot receiver in there, it just could not be a better situation. Very good player, not an elite player, of course, but for what he does, nobody does it better than he does it. I just don't, 163 targets last year. I just struggle to think it gets higher than that's about 10 per game. Struggle to think it gets beyond that. And Jameson Williams, even if Jameson Williams becomes a little something and draws 80 targets, at some point, you think a few of those targets have to evaporate. I think last year was the ultimate ceiling case for St. Brown. Always could be wrong. 10 touchdowns. It's hard to repeat that. He had 6 and 5 the prior 2 years. A lot went well. That's how I see it.
Yeah. Dylan, what's your thoughts here?
Yeah, I think it is in the realm of outcomes for St. Brown. There's a lot of question marks surrounding the other top receivers, really, outside of Tyreek Hill. You got CeeDee Lamb holding out right now. You got Jamar Chase holding in, and Joe Burrow's trying to come back from the wrist injury. And we're going to get to Justin Jefferson in a little bit. And it's real. That offense scares me. That quarterback play scares me. You know, Jim kind of alluded to it. St. Brown's an elite slot receiver, like second in receptions, second in yards after catch, and third in red zone targets with 25 last year. That's what you love is the red zone targets, which is a bit surprising because he's not a big guy. With Jim saying 10 touchdowns is hard to repeat, I agree, and that's kind of what led him a little bit outside of the yardage as well. But I think it's in the realm of possibilities. And Joe, we were talking pre-draft. In my home league, I'm struggling on what I want to do in a keeper league between CeeDee Lamb and Amon-Ra St. Brown. So it's a coin flip for me because I really do think St. Brown could finish as wide receiver 1.
Yeah, I don't think that's much of a coin flip from me, but I hear you. I do hear both sides of the argument. I really do. I think Amon-Ra incredible. I just think there's going to be a little bit more, with Jameson Williams hopefully being healthy and kind of looking like he's going to be stepping up here. I think there's going to be some more targets going in another direction this season for him. LaPorta is going to take another step, hopefully in the right direction. Gibbs is obviously there. I mean, there's got to be a lot of things that go really right for Amon-Ra, and like he had a really good last year, and he still wasn't wide receiver 1. So like, how much better is it going to get? I don't really know if there's going to be a whole lot more. So
can I add one thing, Joe?
Yeah.
This is not to refute anybody. It's just something in my studies that I've been learning. It's what we're seeing recently. These receivers that are putting up the insane numbers, the 1700s and things like that, and the crazy and then chase per game. I had bad quarterback and all that. But that said, it's these guys. It's no longer like the classic X receiver that's dominating. It's like 10, 12 years ago, even the X receiver was the dominant one. Now it's the players that are the hybrids. They play in the slot. They go outside. Tyreek Hill moved all over. CeeDee Lamb was optimized perfectly. I believe it was 53% of the targets in the slot, but they found an outside matchup they liked. It's these receivers that are putting the insane numbers that can do all of those things. That just is an interesting observation. Nothing really to do with the argument, but I wanted to share that with your audience.
No, you're absolutely right, and it's something that we've noticed. I've noticed it with like my dynasty rookie drafts. Like your typical like big time receiver that you typically wanted to draft. I was falling into that trap for a few years in a row, and they've all flopped. It's all these little guys. It's all the Zay Jones, right? It's all these little guys. You're like, damn. I missed the boat on almost all of them because I got so stuck in that world of like, you got to go find the next Megatron, and like those guys don't hit anymore. It feels like at least they not as well. The NFL game has just changed so much, so those little guys can get off the ball a little bit more, and there's not as much pulling and tugging downfield like there used to be.
Perfect example of that is Stephon Diggs. I mean, he was a number 1 guy for how long on multiple teams, but it just seemed like he wasn't finishing as the number 1 guy, or when he did, it just didn't feel right. Like it was something about it. So I love ARSB this year. I'm trying to target him as much as I can. Haven't had any success grabbing him yet, but still got a lot of drafts to do. So hoping I can grab him somewhere. But
one little tidbit just to add is, he is going to be playing most of his games indoors, which is very helpful for a wide receiver when it comes down to the winter months.
Definitely.
And we'll get to that.
Yeah. So if he does end up being the potential, wide receiver 1 for fantasy, does this mean that Goff will finish as a top 10 quarterback? Dylan, what's your take on that?
I think it's possible, but a lot of stuff would have to go right for Jared Goff to do so because he gives you absolutely zero in the rushing department. I think he, 10 to 12 is a solid range of outcomes for him. Mike alluded to it already. 14 out of his 17 games are indoors. Jared Goff's an indoor cat. The splits, you've seen it. Well,
they're here on the screen. So this is the last season. Yeah. The indoor and outdoor splits are incredible. Wow.
Yeah.
Just look at those touchdown numbers.
Yeah. Right. And then Jim alluded to it. Ben Johnson's still there. Absolutely fantastic offensive coordinator. And they love to pass the ball. Top 10 in pass plays per game. And Goff was second in passing yards last year, behind only Tua, but he still finished as QB 11 in fantasy points per game. So a lot of things would have to break right for him to squeak in the top 10 at the quarterback position.
Yeah. Jim, what do you think about Jared this year and his potential upside?
I guess per the numbers, Goff has been top 6 or 7 in the last 2 years straight. But last year, all the quarterbacks were hurt. So, I mean, he got in, that certainly helped. About 6, 7 quarterbacks that didn't play enough games. That helped. The thing that I want to point out is lateral. So Goff can do what he did because, again, he has the weapons. The offensive line's great. It's kind of pristine for him as long as he has to throw to the outside or face heavy pass rush. Obviously, those are the things that are kryptonite for him. But I want to point this out. It's possible that Detroit's defense gets better. It may not. Aiden Hutchinson is really becoming a game wrecker, and that's going to lift players around him. They did draft corners with the top 2 picks. If one of them even pans out, Kirby Joseph at safety played pretty well last year for flashes. I think he's emerging. If that defense gets better at all, nobody's talking about this. But if Detroit, let's say they lead in the second half of 10 or 11 games, they got Montgomery and they got Gibbs. They haven't had the luxury of being able to just drain clock on teams because they're always in shootouts. But if they're winning, Dan Campbell's an old school dude. And if they could put the hammer down on the team and they could run it down anybody's throat, I'm worried a slight bit. And again, it's tough to predict that defense to get better, but that's something in the rear view mirror that could hurt their whole passing game.
Great point.
Yeah. Joe?
Yeah, I mean, all great points there. I do think you can get sucked into the fact that they've got all these indoor games and think, oh man, if he has this many, like it's going to be awesome. The one thing you got to worry about though is a lot of those outdoor games are during your fantasy playoffs. Something that people really aren't looking at. AJ, I know you love the fact that I brought that up.
I do.
But that's one thing that would terrify me, right? Is he's going to have all those outdoor games in your fantasy playoffs, division games, so they're going to be frigid. Like it's not good. So like maybe if you like ride them high, sell them right at your trade deadline and let somebody else deal with them in the playoffs. But but like, would it surprise me? No, but like I also think there's just a lot of these rushing guys, and Jim, you said it too, like there was so many injuries to the quarterbacks last year. Like I just don't see it from him. And yeah, I mean, I do think this defense is going to get better, and I do think they're going to lean on this running game a little bit more. Montgomery was awesome last year, and I think Gibbs is only going to get better and more involved in his offense, and he's an electric player when he touches the ball. So I really like him. So yeah.
Yeah, I'm definitely Team Goff this year. He's the guy I'm trying to target for, just straight building depth. Zero QB, if you will, for a new term I'm coining now. He's kind of the guy that I love this offense around him. I love what Ben Johnson does. We've already talked about him, and just the fact that he stayed. We touched on that in another show as well. He could have gone anywhere. Basically, he could have had his choice of which team he wanted to play for. Obviously once they were out. So. But still, he chose to stay. He wants to see this through, and that's huge for everybody on this offense. So I'm on board with Goff this year as well. But I'm also on board with the bait and switch. So.
All right, so let's jump over here to another one of Goff's targets, and the surprise, I think, for a lot of people in 2023 was Mr. Sam LaPorta, the tight end 1 last year. I mean, a rookie finishing as tight end 1 was unheard of. Like, you just don't see it happening. We see the numbers there. They're really good. 10 touchdowns really helped him get there, that's for sure. Mm-hmm. The numbers aren't quite, the projections aren't quite matching even last year. But Jim, do you see LaPorta finishing as the tight end 1 again, or is Kelsey or Andrews or somebody else gonna pass him?
Yeah, it's a great question, and people are obviously ADP shows LaPorta is going as number 1, and I think you're intimating there are some red flags here that we're not seeing. I think he can keep the 120 targets. I think that might be able to remain. 28th percentile yards after the catch. That was not a great number there. The touchdowns, obviously you said 10. Any player. I think there were 5 tight ends since 2019 that have double-digit touchdowns. It's a small number, and it's not repeat. Like Kelsey frequently hasn't had 10 touchdowns in seasons. So it's very unlikely a tight end does that again. But here's the bigger issue. When I look back in the prior 3 seasons to last year, the overall tight end 1 was usually 60 or more PPR points better than the tight end overall 2. And the tight end 1 and 2 together, like the tight end 2, was at least 30 points on average better than the tight end 3. Last year, LaPorta and the next 5 tight ends were about 30 points between each other. Like they were all like close. So last year was the first time we didn't have a real clear-cut tight end 1 where he didn't lap the field. And obviously we're not drafting in the first round like Kelsey would be like the 106, the 104. We're drafting them in the 3rd round. But the market's telling us they value them all pretty close together. So as to who could beat him, Kelsey is in a great spot. And I don't know how age and injury are going to play out here because I do think players recover slower from injuries as they age. But the beauty of Kelsey this year is last 2 years, defense have really ganged up on him because they did not respect the wide receiver. They respect Mahomes, of course, but not the wide receivers. Xavier Worthy, he may not end up being a great fantasy producer, but his speed is going to occupy a safety, and Marquise Brown can't be understated either. I think the genius behind Andy Reid and the organization bringing those 2 guys in is now safeties were creeping in at the snap, and they were ganging up. No longer with that speed and with Mahomes' ability to buy time and always looking downfield, defenses have to play him honest now, and that means Kelsey's going to have room in the middle of the field. It's going to be like a few years ago. I mean, he may have lost a little bit, but I think Kelsey sails over 1,000 yards. He was close. He was 6 yards off last year. But I think 1,100 yards, I think 7 touchdowns is realistic. I think Kelsey's back to number 1. Real quick, Mark Andrews, people are sleeping on him. Overall, he's a tight end 5. Look, he missed week 1. He was limited week 2 and 3. He wasn't himself. And then that week 11 game can't count against his stats much. He was out after like 7 snaps. Mm-hmm. He was on pace for 900 yards when he played. Yeah. And that offense – from week 12 on with Lamar Jackson as a passer, he was figuring out Monken's offense without Andrews. That offense is going to get a little bit better from the passing perspective, and I think the defense takes a step back. I think Andrews is really sneaky and could go back to compete with Kelsey, but at a cheap draft cost. Sorry, I talked too much.
No, you're fine. I love that take because my Scott Fishbowl team got him as a steal in the 4th round. Mark Andrews, that is. So, Dylan, your thoughts on LaPorta?
Yeah, it was a lot of great thoughts from Jim there, and I tend to agree with it. I think it's still Travis Kelsey as the number 1 guys. There's so many mouths to feed in this Lions offense. David Montgomery, Jahmyr Gibbs, St. Brown, who we talked about already. So LaPorta, I think, is still locked in as a top 3 guy. But what I really don't like about LaPorta, and Jim kind of alluded to it, all the tight end Kelsey, Andrews, and LaPorta are all kind of lumped in closer together, but you still have to draft LaPorta as a borderline top 20 pick in the draft. And we used to draft Travis Kelsey super early because of that positional advantage. That positional advantage isn't quite there, in my opinion, anymore, because I think the tight end position as a whole is much deeper than it has been in years past. Like, I feel like there's 8 solid tight ends or so.
You could argue 9. Like I could legit name you 9 tight ends that I'm totally fine drafting. And when you look at the points per game, right? Kelsey actually had more points per game than LaPorta did. It's just that he played 2 less games. Mark Andrews was 0.3 points behind him in points per game. He just obviously got hurt. So it was really, nothing really separated him from the pack outside of he was the only guy who had double-digit touchdowns last year, and he had 4 more than every other tight end out there. So I think there's going to be either another guy who scores 8 or 9 or 10 or 12, right?
Yeah.
Or he comes down at the same time. And so we're just going to see a mix of stuff. And yeah, I'm not paying the cost for honestly any of those guys. I'm looking at the Andrews and Ingram, who's not getting enough love, in my opinion. There's just a lot of guys there that I like for the draft cost. But AJ.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think there's really much else I need to add here. I'm probably not going to own LaPorta in a lot of leagues because I just don't want to pay that draft cost right now for him. I mean, he is exceptional, but Dylan hit it on the head. It's not really a need position anymore, and he's not the only guy there that's going to help your team. So I probably won't have many shares of LaPorta this year, but. Moving on, we want to talk about this running game a little bit here. Last year, it kind of started off as the Monty show with Gibbs picking up the offense as the rookie, and now do we think that Gibbs is going to take on more of the lead back role this year and actually reach his ceiling? Dylan, we'll start with you.
It's so tough to say, but I personally don't think he's going to take over the lead back. Dan Campbell, tough, gritty type of guy, and that's exactly how David Montgomery runs. He's gonna want to pound it with David Montgomery still use Gibbs in other ways. It's a little scary with Gibbs going as a top 5 back in drafts right now because of that. And for him to hit his ceiling, I almost feel like David Montgomery is going to have to miss some time once again, and I don't really like banking on that. Jahmyr Gibbs is definitely a sexy fantasy football pick. When you go up to your draft board and you stick that sticker up there, everyone's going to give you some oohs and ahs and love it. But it's dangerous picking him where he's going in drafts right now. But love the player still.
Yeah, I agree with that. Jim, what do you think on Gibbs?
Honestly, Gibbs did take over the starting role in Week 10 last year. He outsnapped Montgomery the rest of the way. Here's the kicker, though. Montgomery was down to about 30 snaps a game from Week 10 on, but he got touches on half of his so it's a little bit of a riddle, right? But he got a lot of touches. He was on the field. They used him. Whereas Gibbs, though, saw a substantial increase in snaps. The place that the Lions did not optimize Jahmyr Gibbs was actually in the receiving game. The yards after the catch for Gibbs, we thought he was going to be gangbusters there. It wasn't close. He was 20th percentile in yards after the catch. I don't blame that on Gibbs. I blame it on maybe 2 things. First of all, maybe Ben Johnson hasn't had this type of back and didn't know how to maybe integrate this special type of talent. The other thing is, yes, any quarterback can throw a screen pass, but remember, like Drew Brees, whenever he would throw something to Alvin Kamara, it was on his front hand. He never had to slow down. He immediately went to top speed. Jared Goff may not have that level of touch. And when you have a dynamic receiving back, if you can't get him perfectly into space and they have to hesitate, it's a knock on the game. So the Lions say they're working on it, and I hope they do. But I agree with Dylan, though, that you're taking Gibbs, the running back 5, and he's in the biggest timeshare of all the top guys, and you're counting on too much. And I said earlier, if the Lions defense gets better, Montgomery's the closer. They will not hurt Jahmyr Gibbs. They will not get him injured, putting him in fourth quarter if they're up by double-digit points. That'll be Montgomery's game. And if that happens 4 or 5 times, so I like Dylan's points on that.
Yeah, no, it's perfect. It's perfectly right. And I've got Gibbs lower ranked than a lot of people do because of that. Like, I just don't. I see the boom games kind of like Devin Achane. Like, a lot of people want to go get him early. It's kind of the same thing. Like, Mostert's not going anywhere. Like, let's be real. Montgomery ain't going nowhere either. This is you are drafting these guys quite possibly at their ceiling, and that's scary. When you got guys getting drafted behind him like Jonathan Taylor, Saquon Barkley, no way. Give me those guys in front of Gibbs, who are going to get the rock all the time for their teams. I just want that comfort level. Maybe I'm just maybe I draft too safe. I don't know, but that just when I'm making my pick that early, that's the guy I want over Gibbs. So, AJ, thoughts?
I mean, I'm still a Monty guy. I loved what he brought to this team last year, from that toughness, that grit that we were talking about earlier. And he's just a hard runner. And I think he's going to continue on doing that. Like that, he's not going to just change his style of running. because Jahmyr Gibbs is on the field. I mean, they're teammates. They both want to win. He's going to do what he needs to do, and he's going to watch Gibbs do what he's going to try to do. I mean, the biggest thing for me is I still see him more as the guy within the 5. So I think he's going to have more of those goal line touches. I think it's still going to be a little split up more this year than what we saw. And Jim, you hit it on the head. Like towards the end of the season there, that gap was closing, and it was closing quick. So, hello, Mr. Scampers. But I think it's still going to be a very even split, and just for the draft cost alone, I'll take Monty all day.
Yeah, Uncle Ted here pointing out that Roschon Johnson looked explosive on Thursday. That might be true against a bunch of second and third teamers, but he also played Thursday. That's not a good sign.
No, terrible sign.
Not at all. So, but let's jump over here to some Minnesota Vikings talk, and we'll start with Mr. Justin Jefferson. So, look, there's a lot of talk, that and Dylan, you alluded to it earlier with the Amon-Ra Brown discussion we had. A lot of talk that Justin Jefferson is going to take a step back this year because of the quarterback situation, losing Kirk Cousins, and it's going to be a rookie or who knows, right? And so I put these stats on the board here, and these are the splits with and without Kirk Cousins in his entire career. So the in split is with Kirk Cousins, and then the out is without Kirk Cousins. And they're really not any different. He still sees all the targets. He's still a baller. Like maybe the touchdowns is probably going to be not probably. I would say the touchdowns is going to be the biggest difference in my opinion when it comes to the quarterback play, and that's massive, obviously. But I still think he's just so good. He's gonna find space. He can go get the ball. That's my personal opinion. Jim, what's yours?
So yeah, and I covered this for Nick Mullins alone last year. The 4 last games at Mullins, we saw Justin Jefferson average 6.5 catches, 119 yards, half a touchdown. That was with Mullins. And hey, if it goes south with the quarterbacks in Minnesota, guess who's still on the roster in Minnesota? Nick Mullins. They need him. Right. Now, I defer whenever Greg Cosell says something, I take special note. Greg Cosell is on record as saying JJ McCarthy is not ready, not close to ready this year, doesn't expect to play this year. Now, some people are saying maybe after the bye. Sam Darnold, we say we will, and I know whenever he's had a couple good games, he's terrible. But think about a situation. He has a good offensive line, really probably never had that in his career. They're probably going to get O'Connell schemes that offense up to get it out very quickly. It's a very quick scheme open, and he has Justin Jefferson and Jordan Addison. I think, and really Aaron Jones out of the backfield too. You want to dump to him. That's a beautiful thing as well. Yeah. So I think Sam Darnold is in a very managed situation. And I think with that going on, you hope he's better than Nick Mullins was, except for the picks, of course. But I think overall, yeah, Justin Jefferson, I guess you lower him a little bit. He's obviously not the top 3 pick this year, but I really think at pick 5, you really should consider him.
Yeah, I think you hit everything on the head there, Jim. The only thing that I'm a little bit worried about is I feel like Nick Mullins was just kind of a chucker of the football last year when he had the opportunity to go out there. I don't know if Sam Darnold has it in him to really play like that. That's the only thing that worries me. But I agree with you. Justin Jefferson's still definitely a first-round pick. I am just a little bit worried that maybe they go a little bit more of a run-heavier approach, but that hasn't really been Kevin O'Connell's shtick since he's been the head coach over there. So it'll definitely be interesting to see.
We want to knock JJ McCarthy as not being ready, but if you're following Twitter, he is the next Patrick Mahomes, and I don't know if you guys have seen this. And I saw he did it again today. But like he's posted these things that like if you really watch it, JJ McCarthy got sacked like 3 times on this play. So it's hilarious.
Just like, can't hit him, yeah.
No. But
can't wear the red jersey in week 1.
Right. Yeah. Right. So it's just funny. But AJ, sorry, I had to show that. I thought it was funny.
Yeah, I mean, I don't love the I guess we'll call it upside of Nick Mullins or Sam Darnold on this offense. I get that, that O'Connell's going to scheme, for the quick release. he kind of has to with these options that he has there. Cousins was a much better game manager. He could get the ball out quick if he needed to, but he could also buy time. Especially with all the money he's made on one-year contracts throughout his career, he can buy a lot of things. I like Jefferson, but I feel like I'm going to be passing on him. I mean, I like some of these guys behind him and their situations better. We already talked about Amon-Ra. Obviously, I like AJ Brown. Puka's another one that's in a good situation there. So, even Garrett Wilson, I'm not going to go Garrett Wilson above Justin. But I think, there's a case to be made for it if Rodgers can make it past, the fourth play this year. But yeah, it's a hard sell for me based on this quarterback room right now. And maybe I'll be wrong on it, and if I am, then I'll gladly take my lumps on it. But I'm fine letting someone else take the bait here, and I'll move on and build depth somewhere else. All right. So speaking of Mr. Aaron Jones, you mentioned him there, Jim. I don't know if we should be buying him at his ADP this season, or should we just avoid him like the plague? Dylan, where are you with Jones? Obviously, this might be a sore question for you, but
no, man, it's tough for me to hit the draft button on Aaron Jones. He's going into his age 30 season. Last year, he struggled in some efficiency metrics as well, ranking in 30s in yards created, juke rate, evaded tackles, and breakaway run rate. That just scares me a little bit. Maybe he's regressing because of age. I feel like for him to thrive in fantasy football at this point in his career is going to be in the passing game, which he also struggled with last year, having a 69.8 catch rate, which was 31st at the running back position last year. I don't know if he'll ever really see a massive workload with Ty Chandler, even though the Vikings are afraid to really give Ty Chandler the whole workload as well. We might still see him have a decent sized role. And I just feel Aaron Jones might be going a little too early. Like, he's going ahead of guys, DeAndre Swift, David Montgomery, who we talked about, or Ramondre Stevenson in drafts. And I think I would just rather click the draft button on those three guys over Aaron Jones, if I'm being honest with you.
I knew I'd get the D Swift out of you. Jim, what do you think?
I respect everything Dylan said. I see Aaron Jones a lot differently than I think the masses do. He's very lightly used in his career. And people talk about durability. Yeah, he missed 6 games last year. I get that. And he was like unavailable for parts of others. He only missed 4 games the prior 4 seasons. And the Green Bay Packers staff, regardless of who the backup was or how good or bad the backup was, Aaron Jones was always rested. So he was like in a timeshare all the time. He'll be 30 in December. So he's still, this season, he's mostly 29. It's a little semantics there. But the point of him being lightly used, in Green Bay lets him go. Minnesota, 1-year deal. They have no motivation to preserve him. Use him up, because that's the only motivation they have. Ty Chandler, look, they talked up earlier saying co-numbers, please. They see Ty Chandler. They're talking him up because he's their guy. I get it. Ty Chandler is Ty Chandler. Aaron Jones, runner, receiver. We saw the 5 straight games, at least 118 scrimmage yards to end last season. And Minnesota has a good offensive line. And defenses do have to worry about Justin Jefferson and Jordan Addison, even if the quarterback is substandard. Aaron Jones has to get work here. And 6th-round price tag. Again, he missed 6 games last year, but again, he's mostly been durable. Now, I know Dylan cited some stats. At RotoWire, we have a 64th percentile broken tackle rate, which is still very good. 75th percentile yards after contact, which is borderline elite, and then 73rd percentile yards after the catch. So in my mind, and I know you mentioned juke rate and things like that, in my mind on those, Jones still gets it done. Again, I appreciate what Dylan said and don't disagree. I just see Aaron Jones a little differently.
Totally fair points.
I feel like I could speak on this because I'm the resident Packer fan here. The only argument I have against Jones is in fantasy football since 2019, when he peaked scoring over 300 points, he's gone down in fantasy points per game, not total points. Obviously, you're going to miss a couple games being running back in today's NFL, but we're talking, losing a point per game. I mean, a point per year since 2019, 19.7 to 18.5 to 15.3 to 14.6, and then last year at 12.3. So it's just like every year he has gone down since that peak year. And yes, he is an efficient guy. I feel like efficiency is all of his game. And we're talking about this offense as maybe not being a top 15 offense. So like, it's going to be hard to be efficient in a non-efficient offense.
Sure.
Fair enough. Joe?
Yeah, I really am on the fence with Aaron Jones. I mean, like, you know,
he's a polarizing player in drafts.
Mm-hmm.
I'll put it this way: if I'm setting up my draft the way and it goes the way I want it to, I'm not taking running back around where he's going. So it doesn't matter anyway to me. Like, I just don't want any of those guys that he's going. I don't want Aaron Jones. I really don't want James Conner. Like, I don't want those guys. They don't. I don't feel good when I have to draft them. I'd much rather take some of the receivers that are going rather. But you know, the thing I will say about Jones is that if he can't start scoring more touchdowns again, then he's going to struggle. Like, and that's kind of been, you know, the thing that carried him in the past. And so he's got to get in the end zone. And Mike, you kind of said it, like, if this offense isn't projected to be that great, where's the scoring opportunities coming from? And so that's where it's like, if he's not catching, 80 balls, if he's not rushing for 1,200 yards, the points just aren't going to be there reliably. And so that's where I struggle with Aaron Jones. So I like the player. I don't like the situation. So.
Yeah, I think, going back to the point about O'Connell drawing up these quick release short plays, I think that's going to benefit Jones, especially with Hockenson not being there to start the season. As far as we know, that would be a miracle, and we'll talk about that next. But I think that Jones is going to have some added targets, added play share early on in the season because of that. So I like his floor. I'm okay with that. And, I am targeting him. I think he's a guy that I can see falling down some draft boards. It's going to be a mixed bag. So it just kind of depends on where I'm at in my draft and what I already have to start with. But if I'm going after him as like an RB3 flex play or, maybe even an RB4, I'm definitely on board with that. So, Joe, what do we have for our last bet here?
Yeah. So, you kind of talked about Hawk and we talked about McCarthy before, and it's really like out of these guys, because I don't think anybody expects either one of them to start the season. So which one of them do you expect to have more relevancy at some point during the season? Jim, do you like McCarthy or Hockenson more?
By default, I'm going to say McCarthy in the hopes that he gets on the field after the bye, which is a possibility. Can I say something quick about Hockenson? Because it's really on my mind.
Sure.
Yeah, absolutely.
I've been preaching this for a while. Look, an optimal ACL recovery is 9 months. Hockenson had his surgery on January 26th. That takes us to week 9. That's if it's perfect. The other problem is he's not walking into Kirk Cousins. He's walking into 2 quarterbacks that had training camp and 6, 7, 8 weeks of the season throwing to Jefferson and Addison. There's going to be no chemistry between the quarterbacks and Hockenson after this point of getting used to them. Even Aaron Jones throwing to him. I can't see a world where whichever quarterback's in there is like, okay, oh my gosh, I got to get the ball to T.J. Hockenson. Don't see that world. Just do not see it. I think he's getting drafted as a tight end 14, and I think people want to be smarter than everybody else. I don't think that's panning out.
I'm right there with you.
Yeah, I'm still gonna go Hockenson over McCarthy. I just don't have any interest in McCarthy in fantasy football this year. But I agree with Jim. Hockenson is definitely still scary. If you take him as your first tight end off the board, you're gonna have to take somebody else too. Like maybe if you take Hockenson, maybe you target like a Hunter Henry who's going a lot later, who I feel like is being undervalued. But I don't love Hockenson coming into this year for everything Jim said too. So
yeah, it's tough for me because I had Hawk last year and in multiple leagues and
So good.
And in Scott Fish, and I rode him like forever until I didn't, and it was just very sad when that happened. And I don't think
trumpet sound.
Yeah, I've just never recovered from it. So I took McCarthy in a dynasty draft, rookie draft this year. Not necessarily planning on this year because I have other good options there at quarterback. But, I'm going to leave him on my taxi and see what happens. But I do think he's going to ultimately end up being more productive this year, assuming he does play, obviously. But either way, they're both going to be kind of miserable.
Yeah.
So, I mean, what? Yeah. I mean, come on. It's got to be the second coming of Pat Mahomes, right?
All right. Red jersey all season long.
Yeah.
All right. So that's what we've got for the Minnesota Vikings. We're going to move over here to the Green Bay Packers. And AJ, you've got the floor.
All right. Green Bay. So how much love do we have for Jordan in fantasy drafts this year? His current ADP has him going as QB 10. Dylan, what are your thoughts?
it's so hard for me with Jordan Love right now. Like, he was obviously much better than what we all thought last season, finishing leading the league in touchdowns with 32. But where he really struggled last year was when teams got pressure on him. He ranked 30th in pressured completion percentage and second in pressured completion rate as well, which wasn't ideal. But Joe and I had the pleasure of interviewing Packers beat reporter Paul Bertle just a few days ago. And we asked him what Jordan Love could do to take the next step. And he said it was a small sample size, but what he's seen in training camp is Jordan Love being able to diagnose the defense, being able to evade the rush coming in, extending plays, making plays with his legs, not even just big plays, but just be calm, cool, collected, and being able to find his receivers. So that gets me a little bit more excited about Jordan Love. But me personally, the way I draft is I always wait on quarterbacks, and like you could get Brock Purdy 17 picks later than Jordan Love, and I feel like they kind of have similar upside to one another. You can also get Jared Goff, who we talked about, 27, 28 picks later. So I'd almost rather just wait a round or two and pick one of those two guys. But if you want to take Jordan Love, I don't really have any issues with that.
Okay, good insight. Jim, what do you think about Jordan?
It'll be interesting because last year, remember, the first couple of weeks, 3 weeks, I think it was, Jordan Love had good fantasy numbers. The Packers fell behind. They had garbage time. He caught up. Through week 9, he was terrible. Like, I dropped him on fantasy teams. I wasn't the only person that dropped him, right? We dropped him because it just was not going on. He couldn't throw deep. And then Matt LaFleur figured things out. Matt LaFleur is an amazing coach. And basically, at that point, remember, all his receivers young too, right? So he crafts this offense where he gets all the strengths of Jordan Love and with the strengths of the receivers, and it was schemed perfectly. So Jordan Love obviously was a fantastic fantasy option. That shouldn't change. Here's the one thing I want you to think about. When Aaron Rodgers was the quarterback there, he was commonly throwing about 530 passes a season. The defense was so bad last year, Jordan Love threw 579. Now, if Matt LaFleur is not going to let Aaron Rodgers back in the day throw that many passes, if Jeff Hafley gets that aggressive scheme with the defense, there is talent on the defense. If that defense is even league average, Jordan Love is throwing Aaron Rodgers level passes, which is 530, not 579. And that's something to think about. Like Dylan said, at his cost, though, at quarterback 10, if I waited on quarterback, that's where I'm looking. There's nothing wrong with taking him, but I don't know if the defense is at all better. He's not improving on those numbers, but that's fine. That's still fine.
Yeah. And it's funny you say that because Paul, we asked him about the defense too. And he mentioned how the defense was being more aggressive. It looks like they're getting more blitz packages in, and the corners are able to ball track a little bit better. And they're not having to play out on an island as much because they're getting more pressure. And so that's just all that stuff needs to get factored in as well, which is why we're trying to do those beat writer segments, because you just get an insight that we typically don't get to see. It's awesome. So it's great information. But yeah, I mean, exactly. I like Jordan Love for what he is. He's going to be a good quarterback. Mm-hmm. And at his draft cost, if you missed that on the top guys, he is a great consolation prize. Absolutely. So, yeah. AJ, you got anything else, or you want to move on?
No, I agree with everything you guys said. So,
all right. So moving over, another new running back in this division, we get Mr. Josh Jacobs. He's been a guy who has had a large workload over in for the Raiders for the last couple of years outside of the injuries. What are we seeing for his workload in Green Bay? They've got Dillon, they've got Marshawn Lloyd. Jim, what's your thoughts here?
So I say it this way. When Aaron Jones was young, 26, and he was on the team, regardless of how good or bad A.J. Dillon or Jamal Williams was, they played regularly, and Aaron Jones was spotted. Josh Jacobs is probably he's a bigger back, but I think the model at organization is rotating people through. We even saw with the receiver room. Not that they're playing all equal snaps, but they rotate people through. That may just be the Packers' way. The thing I worry about with Jacobs, the year that the Raiders declined his fifth-year option, he must have trained like an animal because he was playing for potentially a big contract in his mind, because he had his out-of-his-mind career year. Yeah. The 3 years that surround that, barely 4 yards a carry. He's a little under that, actually. Very ordinary back. Zamir White, his small sample size, was actually better in that offense than Jacobs was. Jacobs, in terms of his running, 40th percentile broken tackle rate, below average, 33rd percentile yards after contact. Josh Jacobs, other than that career year, is a very ordinary back who can handle volume of given. But if he doesn't get that volume at running back 12, that's going to be a real problem. But he is a factor at the goal line, and he can catch the ball. These things work into his favor. But if Green Bay goes that old way of splitting it up, that's going to be a problem.
Yeah, Dylan?
Absolutely. And just to add to Jim's point, when Matt LaFleur was even the offensive coordinator in Tennessee, he still split carries when he had peak Derrick Henry with Deion Lewis, guys. Deion Lewis, 150 carries that season. So it's going to be a timeshare here.
Yeah.
Like Jim alluded to, Jacobs has just thrived off of volume his whole career, really. And that monster year he had over 340 touches, which is just an absurd number. And I don't see him getting close to that number this year. He could see an uptick in touchdowns. The offensive line is hopefully improved. It might be the best offensive line. It is probably the best team he's been a part of. So, and this offense is good. So he might get a bunch of scoring opportunities, but I just don't see him having a massive workload this year.
I mean, look, he was well on his way to over 300 carries last year. He just got hurt. So there is something to say about that. But yeah, with the Green Bay, I just don't see them leaning on a guy quite like that.
I love Jacobs this year. I mean, he was always impressive to me in the Vegas uniform. I think he's going to fill in just fine for Aaron Jones in this offense. Again, there are plenty of mouths to feed here in the receiving room. So that's the one hesitation I have. But most of the time, I'm just smashing draft. I love Jacobs. I love this offense in general. I think they're going to be a high-scoring, power offense. I think Love's going to take another step forward. He's still going to be learning, but I think he's going to be slightly better this year. He's going to have more of a comfort level with all these guys. Jacobs is the new guy coming in, but I think he's going to mesh just fine. So I'm not worried about it. But that will bring us. Oh,
he gets a lot of knocks on his efficiency, especially after last year, which is rightfully so. But we talked about it when we talked about Aaron Jones. I mean, how efficient was Aaron Jones? Matt LaFleur, being the coach he is, scheming up what strengths he has for these players. You'd like to think some of those efficiency metrics balance out. It's a life of balances here, and he's going into the best situation possibly of his career, I think. I mean, one playoff game in all of his career for the Raiders, and now he's going into a very good offensive line, best quarterback. So you'd like to think the efficiency numbers even out, but Josh Jacobs is an enticing player because he's going right around that RB 12, 13, 14 range, where you almost want to just do it after, stock loading those wide receivers.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, this is a guy on an offense with potentially 10 plus touchdowns, but volume is king, and he's probably not going to see it this year.
Yeah, all good points as well. So speaking of receivers here, I know you're probably talking in general, but let's talk about Green Bay's receivers. So at the end of the year, who do we think will be the wide receiver that was the most productive for fantasy on this offense? And secondary follow-up question here is who is your target out of these guys? We're talking, we got it on the screen here: Jaden Reed, Christian Watson, Romeo Doubs, and Dontavian Wicks. Dylan, we'll start with you.
For me, for both questions, it's Christian Watson. Guys, this is someone who is being taken as a top 20 wide receiver last season, and then he dealt with injuries to his hamstrings. Now, hopefully the hamstring thing's figured out, because that was a wild hamstring injury with the different weight proportions and all that stuff. So hopefully he gets that figured out. But he's a big play waiting to happen. A red zone threat. You saw that in his rookie year, where I think he had 8 touchdowns or so. Jaden Reed, to me, is just going too early in drafts. And as a part-time player, he was last year really only playing in 3 wide receiver sets, and the Packers run the third most 2 tight end sets, so he's not always on the field. And you could get Christian Watson 28 picks after Jaden Reed in ADP. I think he's the better value. I think he's the best wide receiver in the room. So that's why I'm going with Christian Watson out of this group.
All right. Fair enough. Jim?
I'm with Dylan on this one. So Christian Watson goes to one of the Wisconsin universities, get the hamstrings looked at. Apparently they were 20% apart in how they worked. And now they worked on them with him. He's between 8 and 10% from one hamstring to the other, which is much closer. His goal is to get to 6, and that's working with the medical professionals. So it sounds like the league dumped a lot of money into research on recurring hamstring injuries. So it probably was part of that as well. And it's enough for me. It's like, okay, if you've got that figured out and they're that much closer now, that makes a difference. But what we saw with Watson was last year, in his last 2 games, we mentioned earlier, I talked about how Matt LaFleur had figured out how to piece this offense together. And in Watson's last 2 games, 5 for 94 and a touchdown against the Lions, 7 for 71 and 2 touchdowns against Kansas City. It seemed like as that offense was beginning to hum, Watson was part of that. One last thing. They have this family night, like Friday night, where they have a scrimmage or something. And one of the writers, like last year, noticed the usage that they used the players in that game. It was the usage the way it was in the season. What they noticed was Watson and Doubs played the most snaps. Reed was the slot guy. And we learned that last year. They like him in the slot. And like Dylan said, they play a heavy amount of 12 personnel, 2 tight ends in the field, which means 2 receivers. So Reed is probably per snaps the third guy, although I believe he may be more talented than them all. It might not matter. So I'm with Dylan. Watson's a full-time player for the most part. If he stays healthy, I'd put him at the top.
Okay. Joe, you going to change it up, or are you going Watson too?
Honestly, I mean, like, this is just one of those receiving rooms that I have trouble pulling the trigger on, because there's guys that are getting drafted around him, like Jaden Reed. Like, I'd rather have Chris Godwin, even Calvin Ridley, Marquise Brown, guys like that who are going after him in drafts. Even though Watson's going a little bit later, like, it's just, you never know with this receiving room. And, Dylan, we interviewed Paul. I'm going to bring it up again. Like, we asked him a similar question, and his answer was, it's been different every single day. It's been a different guy shining every day. And that's what it's going to be for this Packers team. And so it's almost like I'm happy to use them in DFS because I'm going to use whichever one's the cheapest, but I don't want to have to figure out which one's going to, if it's a Christian Watson week, and I've got him on my roster, or is this a Jaden Reed week and I want to sit Christian Watson? I don't want to figure that out on my daily lineup league. My redraft league. It's just that type of inconsistency will just drive you crazy. So honestly, I don't want them at all. But at draft cost, yeah, it is probably Watson, and his ADP is actually going up. So eventually, it's not going to be a good value.
Yeah, I think. I mean, I agree with everything that's been put out there. I do like Reed. I'm thinking that because Watson's draft cost is going to start rising, that his might be the one that's going to fall, just for the reasons you mentioned, Jim, with that 12 personnel. Both of you guys mentioned 12 personnel. You only got room for 2 receivers, so if he's going to be your slot, mix it up kind of guy, he's going to lose that playing time, and that hurts Wicks even more, unless all of a sudden they're going to start trotting him out as the second tight end. That's not going to be the case, but I do love Wicks. I love his upside. I love the flashes that I've seen from him. He's just too far down the step chart to really make noise other than maybe a later round best ball pick, and hope he hits there. But Joe, with following up on your thoughts there, if this is going to be like a week to week thing, it's like, great, now we're back to New England. Like that's what I think of when I hear that, and it's just like, I hated that for fantasy. And I don't want to hate these guys for fantasy, because they're all very talented. So that scares me now that you've put that seed in my head. So
you're welcome.
Thank you for that.
You're welcome.
I like that you brought up Wicks though, AJ, because that guy's a player, man. And the Packers seem to find these wide receivers, these late round guys that can just repeatedly develop them. And as a Bears fan, it absolutely drives me nuts.
Yeah.
Hey, in that family night, Wicks only got 6 snaps. It was like the number. I don't remember the numbers of the other, but it was. But if you're betting on Wicks, hey, Watson's been hurt a lot, and they have 2 other receivers. Somebody goes down, he steps into a role. But they really gave him like no snaps, which was very telling.
Yeah. I think that it's going to definitely take some key injuries here, and for him to really be able to shine and show what he can do, and kind of force their hand, once whoever is injured comes back. So, all right. Well, that's all we got for the Packers, Joe. Let's go into the Bears here.
So we've got to start with Mr. Number 1 overall pick, Caleb Williams. Look, he is coming into a situation that not a lot of number 1, overall picks at quarterback do not fall into. He's got DJ Moore, Keenan Allen. They brought in so much talent to surround him with it, to set him up to succeed. His ADP is actually pretty high considering he is a rookie, right? It's QB 12. So Jim, do you think he can hit that value? Are you in on him at that value, or are you just going, he could be somebody else's problem?
I'm going to let it be someone else's problem, because there's multiple factors. I love the situation. Could not have dropped him into a better situation. And Shane Waldron got career year out of Geno Smith a couple of years ago. And man, if he could do that, you don't know what's coming. But the thing I worry about is Caleb Williams in college. He had 4 games last year against ranked opponents. And I know you'll do worse against better teams. He was exponentially worse. He was brutal in all 4 of those games. Now, I know he didn't have a lot around him, but that said, college quarterbacks usually can pick that up if they're great. The other thing I noticed was that Lincoln Riley's offense, and in that offense, it's one of those schemes. Players, even if they're not good, are going to be open. So he had a lot of things working for him. I think the tools are great, and I love how he looks downfield when he's trying to buy them. He can make the throws, but he holds the ball long. And the Bears offensive line is emerging. It's not terrible, but there are some red flags, and I just want to let somebody else deal with it. Maybe he's a superstar this year, and I'm not willing, to go against that. But it's just too much uncertainty for me. And the curse of the Chicago Bears. No, like 4,000 yard passes ever. So you know what? I live in Chicago. Done. Let somebody else do it.
That's fantastic. Dylan.
I'm with Jim. I'm not I'm not going out of my way to draft Caleb. I think he could finish in the 12 to 16 range because of all the weapons he has. What actually worries me the most is how much are they actually going to allow him to throw the football? The Bears defense is pretty good. And the Bears ranked, I know Waldron came over, but the Bears ranked second. It was either first or second in run plays per game the last few years. Matt Eberflus is still a defensive-minded head coach, and he just doesn't want his quarterbacks chucking it all over, turning the ball over. He really wants to run the ball and rely on his defense, and I think that's why they ran out, gave a decent amount of guaranteed money to DeAndre Swift. You know, they got Roschon Johnson, Khalil Herbert still in that backfield who's been very solid at times as well. I think the Bears are still really just going to want to grind you down on the ground and play solid defense, and I feel like they're gonna try to beat you that way.
Yeah.
Whew. Yeah. I'm probably passing on Williams as well. Love the weapons around him. Plus, I mean, we didn't even mention Cole Kmet. They brought in
Gerald Everett.
Everett too. Yeah. So I mean, I can see them potentially running some 12-man, 2 tight end sets to try to have more protection out there for Williams. So I think that'll help him. But I'm not buying that draft cost right now. I mean, most of the leagues I play are non-super flex. So maybe as a backup, see what happens. But I just don't even think at that point, I think he's going to be taken by somebody else that's way more interested than I am. So that's fine with me.
Yeah, absolutely. No, Jim, I said that when he in the pre-draft phase I was worried about Caleb because he had a lot of turnovers. He looked like he was trying to force the ball, like make the big play, be the hero, and man, sometimes you just got to protect the ball, man. Let's just be smart, go win the game. And, you don't have to have the highlight reel. That's what he was felt like. So if he can learn to protect the ball, then I think the sky's the limit with this kid. But for now, until I see him learning that, I'm out for now.
Yeah.
So.
All right. So we touched on his weapons here. Joe, you mentioned the 2 bigger names, DJ Moore, Keenan Allen. But they also drafted Rome Odunze. I mean, do we think that he can be a legit flex option for fantasy this season, or are we thinking he's going to be more of a stash based on how we all feel about Caleb Williams? Dylan, we'll start with you.
Yeah, Rome's not really someone that I'm targeting this year. I watched what Shane Waldron did to JSN last season in Seattle as a rookie wide receiver. I know they're 2 different players, Rome and JSN, but you still don't love to see it. AJ also alluded to it. Shane Waldron likes to run a lot of 12 personnel as well. He was the Seahawks were 10th last year, and in 2022, I want to say they were 4th. So like Jaden Reed, I just see Odunze as a part-time player this year, and he's not someone that I'm targeting. It's going too early. Like Joe said earlier, he's going ahead of the Calvin Ridleys, the Chris Godwins, and those type of guys. I know Rome's a much sexier pick, but I'd still rather have those guys who are going after Rome. Not this year.
Yeah. Jim, what do you think?
Yeah, and then kind of quickly went on to what Dylan said. Waldron played Jackson Smith and Jigba 150 less snaps than what Metcalf and Lockett saw. To me, it's a direct correlation. Unless Keenan Allen gets hurt, which that's probable. 7 games 2 years ago, 4 last year, so that's in the range. But otherwise, it was the 12 personnel, like you guys said, 35% of the time, and so that just eliminates that. And look at DJ Moore and Keenan Allen around the field. Keenan Allen's one of the best possession receivers we've seen, and DJ Moore. People in the fantasy community, I don't know if they probably didn't see a lot of Panthers football back in the day. DJ Moore is a legitimate top 10 NFL type receiver. He isn't that, but he went anywhere. If he gets the ball properly placed, he's a running back with the ball in his hands. Obviously, he's had bad quarterback play, so he hasn't always been able to show that. But anyway, yes, it's going to be those 2, and Odunze is going to be the odd man out for the most part. Super talented player. He'll be something, but probably not this year.
Yep. Joe?
Yeah, I completely agree. There's nothing else to add there.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, I'm on board with that. Now, I did see a couple of tweets that were out that were, pumping him up. And if he does this, they're gonna make it hard for him not. Okay. Again, let's see it on the field, and he's gonna have some games. I think that he's definitely capable of that, but just not this year. It's not what I'm trying to go after this year.
All right, let's finish things up with the Bears here and touch on the running backs. And so they brought in Swift this offseason. Khalil Herbert's still there. Roschon Johnson's there. Are you targeting any of these guys in your drafts, Jim, and which one?
Big fat zero.
Yeah.
Khalil Herbert with maybe an end game. They wouldn't even end game. He goes before that. So, I mean, it'd be the chance that something breaks his way. DeAndre Swift does have that injury history, not last year. I just want to make a quick point with DeAndre Swift. He could not have been in a better situation in Philadelphia. I know the coaching in the second half was terrible. I get that. But he had one of the best offensive lines you could imagine. Defense has always had to worry about Hurts, A.J. Brown, Devontae Smith, and when he was healthy, Dallas Goedert. Yet, we had Swift, week 2 and 3, blew up. Big games. After that, he was 4.02 yards per carry in that situation. He has no second-level vision. Sometimes he can get what's blocked, but there won't be the same level of holes that he had in Chicago that he had in Philadelphia. And unless the Bears find a way to get him used as a receiver as he was in Detroit, which I can't see how, if you have Keenan Allen and as a second, and you have DJ Moore as the first, and Odunze when he's on the field, and Cole Kmet, I just don't see how many times you're going to be lining up passes for DeAndre. So if you could talk about it, but like I believe AJ said, how many passes are there going to be, and is there enough to support a receiver? So all that said, they paid Swift. I get it. Not buying. And Roschon Johnson, I said when he was drafted, he's a career special teamer. He doesn't belong on an NFL field. He showed last year. He was like 13th percentile, I believe, broken tackle rate. It was horrific. Yards after contact. I'm going to get the exact number for you in a second. But the only thing he got decent was yards after the catch, and that's because defenses were in dime, and he was getting dump-off passes, and then there were nobody within 7 yards of him. So he would get some yardage there. He was 12th percentile broken tackle, 23rd yards after contact. When the Bears drafted him, the first comments they made about him were his leadership skills. Yep. When you draft a guy in like the 4th round, you're going to talk up his talent. Zero word about that. It was like he's a culture setter. And last year we saw that's what he is. Now he's draftable, because he should get some volume. If volume's king in fantasy football. But if the Bears can find any other viable option, there's no way this guy holds a job.
Yeah, Roschon, I feel like, is one of those guys where the coaches just absolutely love him because he does all the little things right. He's a good pass blocker. Jim alluded to it. He's a good special teams player. I agree. He's not someone that I'm real interested in outside of a handcuff. I'm okay drafting DeAndre Swift. The touchdowns last year is really what killed him for fantasy. I felt like he had chances to get in the end zone. He just couldn't get it. And then Jalen Hurts comes in and vultures it from him.
All the tackles at the one.
Yeah. Swift's not someone I'm going into my draft like I have to have, but if he's sitting there staring at me as an RB2 target, I think that's fine. He's going to have some good weeks. But yeah, none of these guys get me super excited for this backfield. They're going to use all 3 of them.
Yeah. Jim, you hit it on the head with the comp going last year for Swift to the Eagles. I was so excited to bring the hometown talent home. Yes. Part 1 apparently as follow up for this year, but I'm really hoping they realize what the hell they didn't do with Swift last year and do that with Barkley this year. 2 different players, obviously, but Swift was a sneaky, player, and I really liked his upside and what he brought. And you saw it in those week 2, week 3 games where his rushing yards were incredible. Granted against Minnesota and Tampa, who had both fairly decent defenses. The interesting thing was that he was, his touchdowns came every other week from week 2 all the way to week 10. And then he didn't see another touchdown, obviously, until week 15. But the usage was just horrific. And it was a similar situation in Philly. There's a lot of mouths to feed there last year. But they finally brought in a running back and, had the option, they just didn't use him. So that does scare me a little bit with him coming to Chicago this year. If they're going to be able to do that, plus they have a rookie quarterback. Jalen was a few years in and good to start the season. Well, somewhat good, but it was just disappointing, and I feel like he could be a disappointing play again this year. I'm just hoping he's not.
Mike, who wrote these questions, man? How did we let AJ turn this into an Eagle segment?
I wrote these questions.
Yeah, I know.
That's how.
Love it.
All right, let's finish off the show. And Jim and Dylan, what we like to do is finish off each one of these division draft guides with giving our wild card player of the division. And what this means is your pick for a player who's got a wide range of outcomes, somebody who can be a league winner and somebody, but at the same time could be a total bust and just blow up your teams depending on where you're drafting him. So Jim, we will start with you.
Let's go with Jameson Williams. I know Jared Goff can't throw to the outside, but they might use him on some interest. They did some slot snaps for him. Yeah, so I'm going to go with J-Mo. Look, first year he come back from an ACL. Last year he had the gambling suspension, but in preseason, Coach Campbell said he needs to get reps, and of course he was hurt. Well, he's had a healthy offseason. He has high draft pedigree. You guys know all the tools on this guy. So you know what? Let's go with J-Mo. Sorry, Dylan, I stole your player.
Yeah, you absolutely stole it.
You good
for everything he said, he's the definition of a wild card. He's Deshaun Jackson type, or does he just fall right in line to what Josh Reynolds was in this Lions offense last year, who was useful in fantasy at times last year, a couple weeks, or maybe he cracks into the wide receiver 2 range because of the big playability and just getting the ball into his hands and letting him go to work with all that speed and elusiveness that he has.
All right. Well, I would like to say it was Jim in that last question who brought the Eagles up first. So
yes, blame me. I got big shoulders. I can handle it.
I just need the rest of them. Sure, totally me. But man, there's a couple of different guys that I think could fit the bill here, and I think I'm just going to have to go Aaron Jones. I mean, I preached him up earlier. I just think that he's going to have a really strong start to the season with crappy quarterbacks throwing the ball to him. As long as they don't just worm burn it to his feet. If they get him out in space and use him, he's going to be a valuable asset to that offense. And he's going to be a big part of whether or not Minnesota is drafting first next year, or if they're, drafting in the middle of the pack. And I think that with Hawk out to start the season, again, he's going to take some of that pressure off whoever's in the backfield throwing the ball.
It's a good one too.
Yeah, that was mine, but I'm going to go, since you took that, I'm going to go with another running back, and it's going to be Josh Jacobs. He's got a pretty high draft cost here, early third round, late second round, depending on, the format that you're choosing here. We talked about it, that he's going to be in a fairly crowded backfield. I think he's clearly the lead guy, but even though we all thought Aaron Jones was the lead guy, he really wasn't at times. AJ Dillon was super heavily used, and then they go and draft somebody too. It's like, oh no, what are they doing? So I think they don't bring in Jacobs and give him the money they did if they don't want to lean on him a little bit. But I do think there's going to be lots of times where he's kind of the forgotten man, because that offense and that coaching staff, they're going to do whatever they need to do to win the game. They don't care about stats at the end of the game, at the end of the day. And if it means they just have to play 4 wide and spread the ball around and let these receivers do work, then that's what they're going to do. If it means shove it down the throat with AJ Dillon, that's what they're going to do. So I think Jacobs has the ceiling to be an RB1 and, potentially finish as like a first round talent. But also could bust and be like 5th, 6th, 7th round, talent. And that's going to hurt with the price you have to pay. So All right. So that's it for the show. Jim, want to thank you for coming on, and Dylan, you too. Before we let you guys go, though, let you say your piece and where everybody can find your work and all that kind of good stuff. So, Jim, we will start with you.
Yeah, thanks very much for having me on. Very enjoyable time talking football with everybody. And you can find me over at Jim Coventry NFL on the X. Everything kind of funnels through there. But also, RotoWire just started a fantasy football only YouTube channel. Literally, we have over 100 videos this draft season out, strategy videos, player takes. We got a full-time video editor. Oh my gosh, what a blessing. So yeah, enjoy that. Free trial at RotoWire, 2 days, no credit card needed. Just go to rotowire.com/Jim. And again, thanks for having me on.
Yeah, awesome, man. And Dylan, you?
Yep, you just follow me on X as well, dclemens2222. Check my writing work at fantasy6pack.net. I got a couple articles coming out mid-August, running back committees and talking some zero RB targets. And make sure to check the stuff on the YouTube channel as well. Like we mentioned earlier, Joe and I are interviewing 32 beat reporters, one from each team. Tomorrow we got a Pittsburgh Steelers one dropping, so be on the lookout for that.
Nice.
And thanks for having me, guys. Jim, it was nice meeting you and nice talking with you.
Nice to meet you too.
See you at the Expo this weekend, Jim. All right, man. Have a good night, guys. All right, so that's it for the show. Hope you guys enjoyed the NFC North this week. Later this week, I wanted to say next week, but actually this Wednesday. I know it's a quick turnaround. I forgot I was on vacation. I'm all mixed up, man. So this Wednesday, we're going to be jumping into the NFC South with Chris Allen from Fantasy Life, and then our own Steve Hungartner. A lot of people know him more for his IDP work, but the dude does know his offense as well. So happy to have both of them on. And again, that'll be Wednesday this week. So make sure you tune in. AJ, I'm done unless you got anything else to add.
No, I'm good.
All right. Have a good night, everybody. See you next time.